Hey, happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome back to the I-5 Corridors Traffic Report. Tyson Alger here, joined by Shane Hoffman. Thank you for listening to us either on Substack, iTunes, Spotify, or if you're watching us here on YouTube. Any idea what we might be talking about this week?
No idea.
No idea?
Clueless.
Is there a football? There's a pretty big football game.
Yeah, the one in Corvallis.
Yeah. Actually, I feel bad for the Beavers this week because they do have their own top 25 matchup against UCLA, but top 10 matchup in Seattle, first time in 115 tries. Game day is going to be there.
I still can't believe that.
It's pretty unbelievable,
for
right?
two teams that have had the peaks that they've had.
I was thinking about that this morning too, and I feel like some of the hype from the last 6 years of Oregon-Washington games, you would have thought that maybe there was a top 10 one in there, but it was either one team upsetting the other or a kind of a near miss there.
Right. Well, I had forgotten too, 2018, I had forgotten how high the Huskies were ranked. It was just Oregon wasn't because they had lost that Stanford game right before it.
Yeah. Oh, man, that Stanford game. Poor Mario.
There we go. Great segue.
Yeah, he's been really dragged through that. You can read my column on I-5 Corridor this week where I kind of go to bat a little bit for Mario Cristobal. Kind of an uphill take for me.
Not that you defended his game management.
No, that was the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen on a football field.
But you saw the video too of Alex Mirabal twice going up to him and trying to take him as
and that's such a tough look too, especially with the fact that Mirabal is such a small dude, and it's like big brutish Mario Cristobal ignoring him.
Not the greatest look.
Anyways, it is Thursday of Washington week. It looks like it's Washington week outside. This weather's been absolutely putrid the last few days. It was raining buckets yesterday.
Not great. Yeah.
So we're gonna have a fun little football game on Saturday, Shane. Before we get into that, just how are you doing? How's life?
It's been better.
Yeah.
No, it's all right. I'm just plugging along. Got a busy weekend covering 3 games the next 3 days. One of those weekends that you hear about when you're getting into the industry of how you will maybe spend some of your weekends when you grow up a little bit. But, I think I am pretty good usually about getting out and escaping on the weekends, so I don't mind that I have 3 days of games.
What is the challenge for you in one thing that I think a lot of students who go to like a big football school program, I think they get a little spoiled early on of... you basically got to work in like a pretty world-class press box for 3 or 4 years. And then now I'm thinking that you're going to be on the sidelines or in a press box for a high school game. What's kind of the difference there for you?
Well, the biggest difference is just like there's so much more to do. I don't think it's very conductive towards the type of writing I like to do. I spend a lot of time just writing numbers and making sure that I have all the
it's so
stats
hard.
down. It's the hardest thing for me isn't like doing it as much as just like making sure I don't miss a single play.
Yeah.
And then it's like I there's some people out there that are really good at they do that while they're live tweeting and taking photos, and they get like 2 players and a coach from each team afterwards. It's not
you're looking for like something that you can like use 400 words of introduction on to like lead you into like the one coach quote. I remember when Thomas Tyner rushed for his 700-yard game, his high school record-setting one.
That was a tough one.
The Oregonian had Andrew Thien fill in that night, who was not a sports reporter. It was his first high school game he ever had to cover.
Nightmare.
And I think he ended up being off by like 3 or 4 yards, which is pretty impressive for a game where... But his dad used to call in and ask for corrections if we were off by like 2 or 3 yards. Like he was taking like the stats.
That's the other thing too, is it's no one's gonna get it perfect, but there's gonna be people that want it perfect, and that's the frustrating thing. But no, I did a Westland game a few weeks ago, and I actually did sit in the press box, which like no one does, but I kind of liked the calm, and I could just focus on taking the stats down. That being said, I'm excited to return to Husky Stadium, where I was 2 years ago for that Mario game that you alluded to in your column. Pretty cool stadium, all things considered, and I also have never seen it like jumping the way I would imagine it's going to be on Saturday.
It was a pretty okay crowd the last time. Am I remembering that right?
It was okay, but it was...
Because Washington wasn't great.
They weren't great, but it was raining heavy.
Right.
I remember it being pretty thin. It was cold, too.
It was cold, and I'm mixing a couple memories, too, because I forget that I went up last year for Oregon State, Washington. And that was a game, the Huskies won that game. It wasn't impressive. There wasn't that many people in the stands. And that's when I wrote a column that was, hey, Washington, you need to hold up your end of the bargain here.
And ever since then, they've been a wagon. I think they have the second longest win streak in America behind only Georgia.
Oh, nice stat there. Stat man. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this environment because the monster game that I've covered in this rivalry, which was the 2018 game when it was number 7 Washington and number 20 Oregon. It was the biggest win of the Crystal Ball era at that time. Autzen was awesome for that. 17. Yeah, Autzen was absolutely awesome for that game. But I still don't think I've seen Husky Stadium at its like full potential yet. I've also never been warm in that stadium.
I got I learned my lesson last year or 2 years ago. I got gloves this time.
Yeah.
Cut the fingers off. I'll be up there with those. Probably gripping a warm coffee.
I remember last year at the game, I just went for the straight, I'm going to be warm. So I had a sweatshirt with like a flannel on top of it. And I think Bill Oram greeted me as, do I need directions to my non-house?
Are you doing the game day thing at all?
I thought about it. So we're going to go up Friday night just because I don't want to deal with, it's a 12:30 kick and I don't want to have to deal with like...
The smart move.
Yeah.
What I should probably be doing.
So there's part of me that...
I'm gonna roll in the press box at like noon.
I've still never done like the embed with game day thing, even when it's been on Eugene. I think it's a little bit of a overcovered thing, and also like I don't need to give Pat McAfee any extra.
No,
like I don't know. I don't quite like that show like I used to. That being said, I think it would be cool to spend like that time and just to see like what the Washington campus is like for something like that. I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on the UW campus,
really nice.
Like outside of.
I visited there when I was deciding where I was going to go to school, but they just didn't have like no one was there to like show us around. It was just not as a receptive of an invite or welcoming as some of the other places were, but it's
was this all on the same trip as when you came and checked out
Oregon and some other smaller schools.
That's funny. That's kind of how I ended up at Montana too.
Yeah.
Like we were doing like a swing of, we checked out Eastern Washington, I think Idaho, not as prestigious as you obviously.
Right. Oregon's so prestigious.
But when I went to Montana, we kind of just showed up and like we were walking through the J school and ran into this professor, Keith Graham.
Yeah.
And he was, what are you guys doing here? Oh, we came here from Alaska. We didn't get a tour. And he showed us around campus for like 6 hours that day. And like,
I had a similar experience, not to that level, but that changes your whole viewpoint.
Yeah. So like when coaches talk about like being good recruiters and stuff like that, like I actually believe that a little bit because like doing like certain things can make a difference. And unfortunately, no one was offering me full ride scholarships and photo shoots. So.
That's probably one way we could look at actually talking about this game is like the recruiting side of it, because all of a sudden we don't really talk about recruiting much, but Oregon is one of the hottest teams in the nation in terms of recruiting now. They got Gus Carberland right after that Colorado game. I think he's the number 2 defensive lineman in the 25 class. Elijah Rushing, another 5-star, just decommitted from Arizona. And
coincidentally, right after a visit from Tosh Lupoy.
Looking like Oregon for him, and then all of a sudden this Aiden Breland kid, another 5-star defensive lineman, is going to commit right before this game starts on Saturday. It feels like the biggest game of Dan Lanning's tenure so far. I think it is for all intents and purposes. And I think, again, it's another thing where it's like, if they win, it's probably more about what happens in the future almost than what happens right away. Although if they win, you look ahead, everything's in front of them because they have Trojans, Beavers, and Cougars all at home. And all of a sudden, without Cam Rising, a trip to Utah doesn't seem that daunting anymore.
I'm going to go like full Bill Simmons podcast here and compare. This Oregon team feels like the first Celtics team with Tatum and Brown that like unexpectedly made the finals. Like they weren't quite like... That wasn't really the scheduled year for them yet.
Right.
You know, they were building the pieces, they were getting that momentum, but then all of a sudden they got into it. It was like, oh shoot, like here we. I feel like this might be like if Oregon wins this game, it might be kind of going down that path because I I do think that even though it does seem like this is a peaking year for Oregon because they do have a Bo Nix at quarterback, Bo Nix isn't. I don't think the Bo Nix era is the polished Oregon team that Dan Lanning wants to build. I think that it's made this version of Oregon better than it should be, but I think they're still kind of gearing towards something. And especially as you go into the Big Ten, I'm really interested to see how the kind of recruiting battles between Oregon and Washington kind of play out as we move forward, because for the longest time it's kind of felt like that it's more Oregon and USC as bigger rivals, but now that you kind of like get rid of some of the auxiliary stuff, and it's still going to be USC, but Washington is going to, everyone's going to have the money to go see that kid one extra time, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, and I liked your point about
thank you.
Maybe at quarterback Bo Nix, a Heisman contender, that's like, you could look at that as it's peaking there. But again, like you look across the roster and there's some really good players and some good position groups, but I don't think you could look at that and say this is what the best Dan Lanning led blank room will look like, because I think this is not really close to the ceiling yet. Whereas I look at this Washington team and I do kind of wonder if, not that this is an anomaly or a blip, but like it looks like they could lose their offensive coordinator. Penix is going to be gone. Three receivers. It's just interesting to look at.
I almost feel I went on with Danny and Christian this morning on their say who can you or
say who say pod.
I'm so sorry, guys. Say who say pod. And Christian had asked me what he thought Oregon fans viewed Washington as, and it was kind of tough to answer because I kind of feel like there's more of a mutual respect there than there might have used to have been, like at least during the Cristobal era when it was like the academically prowess and all that. But I do think Oregon kind of views Washington as playing catch up a little bit to at least what the Ducks have done within the last 10 years or so. And even though it's been balanced the last 6, where Washington has gotten one really triumphant win over the Ducks, the 70-pointer. But it's just...
Well, think about this. If you take out that Bo Nix injury last year, if a few minor plays go differently, I know you can do this with a lot of games.
Yeah.
But if you take that out and Oregon wins that game last year, I think there's significantly less oomph behind this game. Now, the rankings don't lie, right? It would still have the billing it does now to a certain extent. But I think a lot of this is just about like Oregon's got to get back here and get theirs,
This might be one of those things that actually means absolutely nothing, but I wonder how much Washington winning that game last year and establishing itself as, hey, here's this team in a major city in this country that is coming alive. I wonder how much that specific win and asserting itself as better than Oregon last year, what percentage that played into their Big Ten candidacy of just, hey, there are 2 viable programs here. Because I don't think you're going to take one, Oregon or Washington without the other. They're kind of paired there, and you've seen that in the protected rivalry games in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
But I wonder if one of those programs was really dragging along, is it as attractive of a add to? I mean, granted, at this point, it seems like all these conferences wanted to add regardless.
Right. But I think that's another good point, because big city, surging brand, new coach, Heisman contending. They play fun football, which is usually, it means it's offensive and high flying. I'm curious because we can do like the predictions, but do you have like a sense of is it skewed one way or the other for you in terms of who wins this game? Like it's much better or worse for one program? Does that make sense?
Man, that's an interesting one.
Because there's a chart that came out that showed the probability of, with win or with loss, of making the Pac-12 championship game based off this game, and this was like the biggest deciding game of the rest of the Pac-12 slate, I believe. But I'm curious if you have any kind of take on that.
In a sense, you would think that there's not a whole lot for Oregon to lose, like if you're being logical about this game, because they're underdogs on the road to a team that they lost to last year. But that's part of why there's a lot riding on this game as well, too, because, again, as I wrote on Monday, and this stat is kind of jarring, Mario Cristobal was 8-0 against Washington, USC, and UCLA. He was 3-0 against Washington.
And a lot of them were
Yeah,
murders.
like that guy isn't good at certain things, but like he was pretty darn good at like getting his team ready to play like against the rivals. And yeah, that might have been part of the roster that he had. It helped having Justin Herbert in 2 of those games. Yeah.
Because another thing I was thinking about with the surge that Washington's going on, and I might write about this a little bit in the piece I'm writing this week, but if you look back at last year, so they're on this 12-game win streak right now, and I think win streaks between seasons is kind of a dumb stat sometimes. That being said, you look back.
Yeah, like some guy who's now like a dentist is
right.
Yeah, like was the guy quarterback in the team for.
So you look back though, Washington had lost 45-38 to ASU, and then they go up, or they were up in Seattle, and then the Beavers go up and they beat the Beavers, who at that time, I think the Beavers were under them in the rankings. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it wasn't a huge win either way. It was like, okay, they got it done. It wasn't pretty. Then they beat Oregon the next week, I think. And that was the game that they weren't supposed to win because Oregon was number 6 at that point. Washington had fallen to 25, I believe. And then ever since then, so I just think there's something interesting about like that Oregon win. That is kind of the game you look at in terms of what kicked this ascent off.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was that was kind of the arrival. I think that's always kind of the case when you have a new coach and like a new quarterback and it's hard to say like non-traditional team, but just like a team that's not expected to be at that point this year. And that's also where I think in terms of what you can gain from this game, everyone knows who Dan Lanning is at this point, whether it was from the Colorado thing, whether it was from smoking cigars after the recruiting stuff, or the fact that he's the coach of the number 8 team in the country with a lot of stats that are pointing towards they should actually be better than that.
So I'll go over a few in a second.
You will. Stat man! But he's got to beat Washington, man. Like, you got to beat your rivals. And especially when these rivalry games are going to be what decides who potentially gets trophies and who potentially gets births into something greater than that. And so I think there's a lot of people who are just waiting to be able to not crown Lanning, but there's a lot of things that are pointing towards this guy might be that dude. Mm-hmm. And this is the one thing that he's missing so far is like this type of win.
Especially the way that they lost to Washington and Oregon State last year.
Absolutely.
Both were... I mean, the Oregon State one, I think, has almost been forgotten how brutal that was. Yeah, well, so that was kind of part of... Another thing I talked about with those guys this morning is they asked, just how much is Oregon harboring resentment towards how the game ended last year. And I think that was kind of dampened down quite a bit by the fact of how that Oregon State game ended a couple weeks after, because it was just like a 2-week just collapse of that entire right
team.
I think you look at it more now in terms of just that the way that season. I know they went out on a high note, I would say, with the UNC win and the way that they pulled that off, kind of opposite to how they finally finished, but they didn't finish those games. And so you look back on that, and that's, I think I just remember it as a season-ending kind of lull rather than just one game or the other. Numbers? Yeah,
let's. I asked. We were texting this morning, and I asked. Shane said he'd found some good numbers, and I said I'd give you about a minute-long segment here. You can expand if need be. But okay. I also didn't want to put like too much pressure on you here.
Well, so last week,
if we were being fancy, we would like do like a graphic up on the world.
We'll work on that.
The YouTube, but
maybe for the Big Ten.
Yeah, we'll wait till we get that Big Ten money.
Right, it's coming.
Yeah, I got to get a couple more Shanes.
So there was a lot of numbers last week that happened or that came out during the bye week. So I pulled some from this week that still stand, given that other teams played games last week. Okay. Oregon didn't. Kind of all over the board here, so I'll just go.
Yeah.
And you just
go. Give me a stat.
Some quick hitters.
Give me a stat.
Okay. Toughest upcoming schedule among AP top 10 teams. Oregon is number 2 in the nation behind USC. Their upcoming opponents have a .718 winning percentage. Not a shocker at all. Mm-hmm. I don't think. Oregon and Georgia are now the only 2 teams in the nation that are top 10 in both scoring offense and defense.
That's such a funny one to compare the two.
Super funny.
Because Georgia.
For so many reasons. There's some interesting Some interesting running ones I want to get into because I think it's actually going to be pertinent for this weekend.
Okay.
So the top 14 FBS teams this season that have gained 4+ yards on 50% of rushing plays, 50% plus, 4+ yards on 50+% rushing plays.
You got all that.
There's 14 of those teams.
Okay.
I set that up badly.
Mm-hmm.
Oregon has the highest percentage at 57.9%.
So 57% of their runs go for 4 or more yards.
Yes, and that's the highest in the nation.
That's pretty impressive.
Pretty impressive. When it comes to the top 10 most efficient, explosive running games, and also a top 10 most... sorry, I should have prepared better.
Yeah, you should.
Top 10 most explosive...
You sound like that Fox graphic looks.
Yeah,
like,
that was horrendous.
I saw that.
Let me try that again.
Yeah.
This is why I don't do numbers very often, because it's just it's all over the place. Mm-hmm. So of the top 10 most efficient run games and the top 10 most explosive run games, Oregon and SDSU are the only two in the top 10 in both categories.
Okay.
So efficient.
So not only are they breaking big runs, but they're breaking good runs often. Often. One
could say the most in the nation.
Wow, like number one.
Number one,
okay.
Anyways, let's go to some defense. So of the most improved scoring defenses from last year to this year, Oregon is number 4 with a 15.6 point difference on average per game.
And they're allowing like 11.8 points per game, I believe.
Something like that. They are number 4 in the nation, allowing 4.0 yards per play defensively.
Man, that's still what I get hung up on. And I know we talked about this a little bit last week, is this again, the stats are all there.
Yeah.
I just need to see it a little bit too.
Yeah, because they're still haven't played anyone.
But each week, some of those teams look a little bit better in retrospect. Like, for instance, Colorado put up a fair amount of points on USC.
Right.
Granted, that was 2 weeks ago. Also, but then again, Colorado kind of just barely got by Arizona State.
Well, USC barely got by Arizona.
True. Yeah.
That's why I don't love doing it. Yeah. But it's interesting because all these categories... the big takeaway here is just simply that no matter how good they are or how elite they are to what level, Oregon is playing the most complimentary football it's played since... Take it away.
I can't remember one that's been like this balanced, because even in like Oregon's like elite years, the offense was that much better than the defense. So, and
it still could be.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But on offense, you have the balance with the pass and the run. On defense, you also have a balance where they're really good against the pass, and they haven't been very bad against the run, because usually it's kind of one or the other almost.
It is funny that they are averaging like 58 points per game or something stupid like that.
Yeah, but it helps that they put up 81.
It does help.
They're also third in the nation in middle 8 scoring differential, so that's the 4.
Oh, I like that.
That's the 4 minutes before the half.
That's when you get into like real nerdy football stuff, yeah.
And then just to top it off, number 2 in the nation behind Oklahoma in relative scoring margin.
I looked one up this morning too to add, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I was just looking up how often opponents were converting third downs on the Ducks last year, and it was like 48%.
Yes.
And I think this year it's down to 34 or 35.
Yeah. Meanwhile,
which still feels a little bit too high, but
yeah.
That was just something that we were like really like honing in on like the first like 3 weeks of the season, when you're still kind of like mopping up last year's narratives, and it was just like, okay, they're being a little bit better situationally and they're tackling better.
Tackling is the big one here.
Do we have a stat for that?
I don't, but I was on the phone with a former Oregon player yesterday. 2 days ago now.
Look at you.
And he said that's the biggest difference he notices is just the tackling, and it's a simple one, but it plays a role in all those statistics, because you could imagine, it started with Georgia last year. They were just getting torn to shreds by yards after the catch. On the flip side, Washington's numbers don't look as balanced.
They like to pass the ball.
And they aren't particularly great at getting off the field in third down situations, getting much pressure against opposing passing offenses this year. So we've talked a lot about this game and different angles, and now I want to know.
31-28 Oregon.
Wow.
Yeah.
31-28. Okay. Can you give me some logic behind that, or is that just a gut feeling?
Last year was, what, 38-31?
37-34.
37-34. So in the 30s. Weather's going to be bad, I think. So I don't think Penix is going to be throwing for like 500 yards this game. I think both teams are better defensively than they were a year ago. This is going to be a pretty tuned up crowd. I just like the way Oregon's offensive line can establish itself. I think it travels well. I think as long as they don't shoot themselves in the foot with false start penalty, that's going to be key for the Ducks. Like if they can limit their penalties, this is a team that doesn't turn the ball over. They have 1 turnover all year. They have the best turnover margin in football. Limit those errors. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. You are a deeper football team than Washington is across the board. Michael Penix might be a better quarterback than Bo Nix, but that's like one of the few advantages that I think that they truly have. A lot of people will point to the receivers just because Washington has like a trio of like really good. Oregon's got great receivers. Like I think these.
Part of it's optics of how much they're throwing. They're great. They're going to be NFL guys, but they also throw the ball a lot.
You know how in the Jurassic Park movies, in the first one, like the scariest dinosaur was the T-Rex, and like as it should be, like the T-Rex is a killing machine. It's perfectly good at what it does. And then like the sequels come, and then they have to like have like some form of like bigger T-Rex. Penix kind of feels like that bigger T-Rex. Like he does all the things that like Bo Nix does like well, but he's just a little bit better out of him. But like the T-Rex can still kill you.
Yeah,
you know,
he's the regular sized T-Rex.
Yeah, the regular sized T-Rex can, and like under the right situation, you might get him. You know, that's
wow. What did you practice that one in the mirror?
No. This is
just off top.
It just came into the dome.
Wow. Well, you didn't leave me much to work with here.
Yeah. No, but it's like an A+ offense versus like an A offense. Like they're both very good at what they do.
Well, and Oregon's better in some ways. Again.
Yeah.
Penalties interesting too because for as bad as Oregon's been, Washington's been worse. I don't remember the exact number, but they are one of the most penalized team in the nation. They are particularly susceptible to pass interference calls. They've gotten 1 in all of their games so far this season, multiple in some.
Interesting.
So I do wonder how that plays out. I don't know if that's going to be a deciding factor, but I do know what I think my deciding factor is going to be, and I just think Oregon's going to punch them in the fucking mouth. I really do. I don't like sitting...
You think like Justin Jacobs is going to come out there like first play and just like Justin Flo?
I don't know how he's going to come back for this game. I don't know. That seems like an aggressive first game to come back for.
Yeah.
Anyways, I don't like that we're sitting here on like a podcast that covers Oregon, and Oregon's like a road underdog, and we're both like, yeah, Oregon. But I just have a sort of feeling, and it's not an overwhelming one because I don't think either one of us is going to walk out of Husky Stadium remotely surprised if Washington wins.
Yeah, I think ultimately, for much of that game last year, I thought Oregon looked like the better team until they kind of didn't finish the game. And that's something that you're writing about later this week is about Oregon finishing the games. And I just think, again, and this is going back to something that we've talked about a lot, I think of all the teams, Oregon addressed its biggest need in the offseason, and that's they upgraded the defense and they upgraded the pass rush specifically. If Michael Penix has time, Washington's going to win. Oregon has 18 sacks this year. They had 18 sacks last year. Like, there's a big difference. And as long as Dorlus is playing, as long as Jordan Birch is playing, as long as Popo is playing, like, they're getting push that they weren't last year. And I think that's going to be the biggest factor for the Ducks.
37-27.
37. Oh, you're going for the full 10-pointer. Okay.
I think if it doesn't end in double digits, I think there's a really good chance that Oregon is able to play a sort of keep away and just kind of grind Washington down and able to get up 10-plus points. Now, that being said, with how quick striking Washington's offense is, it's like a covering a spread type of deal. Like, they might have a late touchdown, but I do think there's a world in which Oregon can just control this game in a way that they couldn't last year, and they don't even let it get to a shootout like they did last year. It's
crazy having this important of a game and having both quarterbacks be so experienced, too. Like, this is... Like, they're going to know how to handle this. Yeah. So, it should be fun.
Where does this rank for you among the big Oregon games of late?
Man, that's a good question. I think the biggest one recently was Ohio State.
Yep.
That was a doozy too, because those ones early in the season, like you have the whole off season to talk about. There's more riding on this game, so this game's bigger than that one. Man, you're gonna have to maybe go back to. I don't know if I've covered a game this big.
Really?
Yeah.
That's surprising.
Well, because
some big games.
Yeah, but the 2014 season, they didn't have like that one like big opponent like in the Pac-12 schedule that they had to get through. They had an early loss against Arizona, and then they beat everybody else by like 30 points a game. And even in the Pac-12 championship game, it wasn't like so much was riding on this. And then outside of that, I mean, we've all kind of know the peaks and valleys of the crystal ball years. And
Yeah, I was thinking, because I mean, I have not covered near the volume you've covered, but I've been at some pretty big ones, and this is for sure the biggest one. I guess for me, like, Ohio State, I would think about, just because everything about that game told you that the Oregon Ducks had no chance to win.
Right.
And then they did.
I am talking to Mike Bellotti tonight, so maybe I'll push that one by him and see what he thinks too. I think it would be a disservice for us to try to preview the Oregon State UCLA game, because honestly,
I don't have numbers. I don't have takes.
The only other thing that I want to hit, the Pac-12 men's basketball media poll came out today. They have Oregon at 4th. Feels probably about right.
Yeah,
Also, Dana Altman continues to have the absolute worst luck with his incoming 5 stars. Mookie Cook is going to be
December, January, it looks like.
Yeah, that add him to the list of Lewis King, of Bull.
Yeah. That's the story, honestly. I'm not sure how much Mookie would have played, given how deep they are, early at least. But again, we know depth's important, because look at last year, everybody was on the medical table early in the year. I can't really get a feel, just the way that I can't really get a feel for Oregon State UCLA, although I am excited for that game, because UCLA had a really big win against Washington State, and their defense looks really good. I can't really get a feel for this Oregon team. In the last 2 years, I've thought that the pieces made sense, and I was really high on them, and I was wrong. And this year, I'm not even going to do that. I'm just going to kind of sit back. And we were talking separately. We were talking to Will Patterson, the men's basketball SID, and like trying to get some sort of, not picking his brain essay, but just like, what are you seeing? And he's like, they want to play fast. They got a lot of guards.
That's going to be the hardest thing to do these days, is to forecast a college basketball team, because there's so few guys on the team, and so many of those guys that can change rosters every year. That like, good luck.
Yeah, and again, to finish that point, he was like, I don't know, basically. I mean, it's not his job to know, but...
I mean, I expect N'Faly to be pretty good, but...
Yep, that's about the one thing you can... If he's healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, apparently he's been hurt again this offseason. Yeah. I'm hearing good things about Jackson Shelstad. That's a plus. I think Cousinard and Barthélemy will be improved.
Okay.
The thing for me, though, is I don't know... They don't really have any 3-4s. I mean, maybe KJ's that guy early, right? But he's a raw 5-star freshman. Look at the roster. They have good bigs, they have good guards, and it's like, if they get one guy to pop from the 3-4 position, that's probably what they need.
Yeah.
I'm putting you to sleep over here.
Yeah, a little bit. I feel like it's been a while since Oregon got lucky with a guy, and they kind of need it. Like, I know that's not like the most sound, like this is what a coach needs to do, but like sometimes success can just come down to like the right guy hitting. And I think I wrote a few months ago that I thought Shelstad could ultimately be that guy for Oregon. But
I think you're probably right. He's probably the best candidate.
But also, it's like he's a freshman, and
think about even a guy like Pritchard when he was a freshman. I know that was a very different circumstance, but
let's clean it up with this. I know you might be doing like just a day trip Saturday, but what's your favorite thing in Seattle? Now that you've been here for a few years, actually having not gone to Washington for school, what do you feel like you missed the most?
I don't know if I could pinpoint one.
Good question,
thing.
Tyson. Thank you.
It is a good question. Because, when I'm traveling, like a big part is like the food scene. And I'm so happy with the food scene here that when I go to Seattle, I'm not like blown away. There's some great spots that I have to try. I like the sound. Like, I just think it's so cool. I mean, that's like, yeah, you know, that was probably the
It's just drawn to the water, man.
Yeah, and we have water here, but it's just a
we have water at home. That's the vibe of like no, we have water at home.
Right.
Like, that's the Willamette River is.
Yeah. No, it's a whole different, and there's reasons that I don't know if I'd want to live in Seattle right now, but I could totally see myself living there in the next few years, and it's a little bit, it's one step up in terms of just the magnitude of everything. It's just a little bit bigger, and it has that feel to it. And I actually think it's kind of cool that this game is being played there.
Yeah, I just think it's cool that this game specifically is being played in Seattle on that stage, because I do think as nice of an area for football as Eugene is, it's still not, you know, up there with the top landscapes across the nation.
I wonder how much because we just cover every game in Eugene, you kind of feel that's because, I mean, there are certain college football environments that are in places that are in the middle of nowhere, but like they seem big time just because they have that aura to them.
And Oregon's
and Oregon is one of those, but also like we live here, and I've been to 100 games in that stadium at this point now, and like you get up there and it kind of just feels like your office. So
I need to get to some SEC games before I die.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I think you probably got a few years. So.
Few.
Anything else that we need to hit before signing off?
I don't think so. I'm excited. This should be a good one.
We're going to have some pretty good coverage here the next few days at i-5corridor.com. Would really appreciate if you're a free subscriber or just listener, consider a paid subscription. It helps us do this. We're gonna be racking up quite the hotel bill and gas bill the next couple of days. Mainly just me, room service, baby. My HR department approves everything. So
there we go.
Yeah. For Tyson and Shane, we'll see you on the other side.